All I could say is, wow. It's when you see the before and afters of what we're going to take a look at in this video, I think it's really compelling to see what we can do today when it comes to noise reduction and sharpening. And there's a little bit of a backstory that I think is important to this to see how I got to this place, because I don't like to keep doing videos that I've changed my workflow, but I have changed my workflow. Okay, and I want to explain why, because I think if I try to change it every few months, if we change every time a new plugin comes out, a new something or other comes out, we never really get comfortable. We never really start to focus on a good workflow and concentrate on the photo. So I'm very, very careful to make sure something's very ingrained. So what I'm describing to you really happened to me earlier this year, 6 to 8 months ago. It was a very eye-opening experience. To backtrack a little bit, I was all Adobe for a long time. I tried not to use any plugins, even in my wildlife photography. Even though I knew Adobe was not good at noise reduction, I really fought it. And I was pretty vocal about 4 years ago to come out and say, I started using Topaz's noise reduction and to extent some sharpening, because Adobe has never really been good at sharpening, that I was using that. Okay, and then I was actually pretty vocal about that. A couple years later, Adobe answered with including really good noise reduction on the raw level in their raw editors in Lightroom and Adobe Camera Raw. So for a long time, that's pretty much all I used. And I was mostly happy with it, but there's a couple of places where I never was. One of those places was really high ISO photos that required a lot of cropping. I saw a bit of a hole there. Okay, I was never happy with the image quality. The noise reduction was okay, but the sharpening, once you have to crop tightly into a photo, it starts to look softer. The crop doesn't make the photo softer, but because you're taking away so many megapixels and you're zooming, you're essentially pixel peeping on that photo, it starts to look softer, okay? And Adobe has never been good at sharpening. I've always thought they were okay at upsizing, but when you take a photo that really requires what I call the works, noise reduction, sharpening, and upsizing, you're pushing the boundaries of what we can do here. And I think Adobe would tell you, well, they've got super resolution and they've got the enhanced details features, but there's a reason why you don't see people talking about those a lot, and that's because they're just not very good. The noise reduction I do think is excellent. If you've got a good full frame photo, a good full frame subject that's very sharp, I think it works great. The photo you're going to see here, you're going to see why it needed a lot of work. But that was the first thing that got me to look at it. The second thing was sharpening. I take a lot of landscapes handheld now. I'm not going to lie. I get tired of the gear. And I found that my landscape and travel, if I could walk around with a lot of the in-body stabilization, a lot of the improvements in the quality of the photos in the camera, and our editing tools, I'm able to take a lot of photos that used to require a tripod handheld. They're just a touch soft. That tripod gave me that critical sharpness. And these photos were always just a touch soft, which was fine, but I was never happy with the way Photoshop sharpened them, so I just accepted it. And you're gonna see some changes here in this video. So I wanna show you what I started with. And that was this photo here. I like a lot of things about the photo. As you can tell, it's going to require a pretty heavy crop. So I brought it into Lightroom. I did noise reduction. I did a little sharpening. Again, I can't say anybody has ever been happy with these sharpening tools. To me, all they really do is actually add more noise. They don't typically sharpen the photo very well, even with masking, even with all of the little edge detection things we can do. But I went ahead and I did it, okay? And you're going to see some zoomed in before and afters here in just a second. But that's where I started. Okay. Then I decided, I hadn't looked at Topaz Photo AI in a while. And so I downloaded that. Okay. And one of the things that I didn't used to do when I did Topaz is when I would use Topaz, I would just use it more as a plugin. If you go up here to the photo menu inside of Lightroom, and you can access it from the filter menu in Photoshop, you can jump over to your plugins. This doesn't take the raw photo over there. This converts it, very similar to the way it does if you jump to Photoshop. Okay, so you're not getting access to the raw level information, which is really what Adobe's getting access to when they're doing their noise reduction, because they're doing it on the raw photo, and you're going to get better results that way. But over the years, Topaz has added a feature inside of Plugin Extras where you can go into Photo AI, and now you get access to the raw photo. You're essentially doing it really before you do much else to the photo. Now you get access to the raw photo and you get to keep your normal workflow, okay? You don't have to go find the photo and find or open it up and then import it into Lightroom. So now we fast forward into Photo AI. It's running the raw denoising on it. And then I added, you can see here, we can add multiple enhancements to it. So I added a sharpen enhancement, and then I added an upscale enhancement. Real quick, folks, if you are considering Topaz Photo AI, not everybody needs to. High ISO, low light photographers, fast action, wildlife sports, anything indoors, I think you'll get a lot from it. And if you've just not been happy with Adobe Sharpening, I will always say when Adobe's doing great things, and I think they've done wonderful things in certain areas, Sharpening's not one of them. So if you found that and you're considering Topaz, two things. Please, if you would, use the link that I have below. I get a small affiliate commission if you go through that link, but I'll also sweeten the pot and send you a PDF shortcut guide. So you can click on that link for Photo AI. You can click on that link and you can find out a little bit more about that one. Number two, this is a great time. Topaz has got a great sale. So if you're thinking about doing it, number one, if you never purchased it, you'll get a great deal. Number two, even if you have purchased it and need to renew your license, this is a good time to do it because it just tacks on to your existing licensing period. So you might as well go in and save a lot of money during the big sale that they're running. So let's jump back in and start to take a look at some of the details here. And I'm going to zoom in for you here, but you can see once I stack all three of those enhancements, it's actually pretty intensive. I call it the works. I'm doing the works to the photo, and that's really where I find that I'm using Photo AI is when I need this stuff. And if I could say anything, it's be flexible in your workflow. Not every photo is created equal. Some photos can have a certain workflow, other photos can use something else. So from here, you can export this image and it'll get saved back over into Lightroom as a DNG file, very similar to what Adobe does inside of Lightroom Classic by duplicating the file and creating a DNG, although there is technology that's coming out where you'll be able to do it on the original file. So now let's jump over into Photoshop and let's do some comparisons of this one. And this is the original photo, okay? Original photo, untouched. Essentially, I didn't do any noise reduction, didn't do any sharpening, brought it into Photoshop. Now, the one thing I did do is I upsized it because I knew I'm going to need to crop in on this photo. So we're going to go and we're going to crop in, which is going to give the appearance of making it look a little bit softer. So we're going to crop in on that photo. So I went from, when I upsized it, it went from, it was about 16,000 pixels, although we just cropped a lot of that away. And now we're at about 3,000 pixels, okay, which is still plenty for sharing online as well as printing. So now when we take a look at what we have here, that's the original untouched, no noise reduction, no sharpening photo. Here we have the Adobe version where I did Adobe denoise, okay, and then I added a little bit of sharpening to it. 5, 6, 7 years ago, I'd have been very, very happy to get this in Adobe because Adobe was never good at this stuff. So to get this far in Adobe is great. And honestly, if you're only going to share the photo at that size, most people aren't going to see it. But even on social media, people can pinch zoom. They love to look at details. It's not going to hold up to a big full screen image like this. And it's not going to hold up very well to a print as well. Again, even some social media. Now, you could say we could add some sharpening in there, but I want to show you the Topaz version first. So this is what we had. This is what we had from Photoshop. This is our Topaz version. Photoshop, Topaz. There's no comparison. They're not even close. They're not even in the same ballpark. I could put noise reduction close in the same ballpark, but by the time you add sharpening, by the time you throw in that upscale, they're not even in the same hemisphere, okay? Now, again, you could say, well, let's go into Photoshop. We did some raw sharpening, which, again, I don't think anybody's ever really thought the sharpening in Lightroom or Camera Raw were good. So let's go down here to the really only good sharpening tool in Photoshop, which is Smart Sharpen. And I can crank this up. I can crank this up almost as high as it goes. I can crank it up to 400%. And look at what it does. All it does is add noise to the photo. Right? It's not actually sharpening the edges or anything. It's not actually enhancing the texture of the photo. It's just adding noise to it. It just makes it look odd. Now, there are tools in Photoshop where you can sharpen the edges, you can use luminosity match, you can do all these things, but they don't do, and I promise you this, they don't even come close to getting to that. Okay. Now, for some people, that might look a little plasticky, a little painterly, but you can even always go in there and layer it on top of the original file and pull the opacity down, and you can start to infuse a little bit of that original texture into the photo if you wanted to bring back a little bit of noise. Some people like a little grain, some people like it to be very smooth, but you've got some options in that workflow. The point being is there's no way that we were able to get there using the tools that we had. Now, I mentioned a little bit about sharpening earlier. So you saw demonstrated here a tightly cropped photo. The crop didn't make the photo soft, it made it appear soft. And I think sharpening did a better job than we can do anywhere in any tool with what we were able to do there. But I also mentioned I'm photographing a lot of my landscapes and travel photos handheld. I'm just tired of the gear. And they're sharp. The equipment and the cameras do great, but they're just slightly soft. Will they hold up to most things? Yeah. Again, if people pinch zoom and start to zoom in on it on social media, or you want a full screen, you're going to put it on a 4K or a 5K sized screen, you could start to see some of that softness here. So same deal. Inside of Lightroom, let's go File, go down here to Plugin Extras, bring it right into Topaz, because the workflow is nice and easy. We don't have to necessarily go find the original raw file. Once you get in there, it did some denoise on it, which is fine. It didn't hurt the photo. Sometimes it can help a little bit. And then I added sharpening to it. I didn't even change the defaults. But here's what's interesting is let's zoom in a little bit on this one here and take a look. So I'm not even pixel peeping. 50% before, after. You can see it a little bit, but not much. When I get here into 60% before, after, you start to see it more. Let's get all the way up to 200%. So here's where you're really going to see it: before, after. The photo, again, when you see the whole photo, you don't necessarily see that softness, but when you look at the difference between the before and after, it's pretty staggering inside of here. Again, before and after. There is a super focus beta option up here. I won't talk too much about it just because it's very, very slow now. Okay, so it's amazing what it can do. It's essentially trying to take something that was out of focus and bring it back into focus. And you can even preview it. You don't have to render it on the whole photo. By the time you do go render it on the whole photo, it tends to take a long time. I can only assume, if I were to look at the future, where Topaz seems to be going with the cloud credits that it has, where it seems to be going with some of this technology. Number one, it'll get faster. I know, everything in these programs do get faster over time. Number two, it seems they're offloading a lot of things to the cloud, and that will probably get faster over time as well. So it's pretty exciting to see where it can go. Again, it's not something I'm necessarily using too much of now, but as I said earlier, if you are considering purchasing or renewing your license, please use the link below. I get a small commission for that one, but I will also send you a PDF keyboard shortcut guide for Topaz Photo AI. I also mentioned that they're running a great sale, so whether you're going to buy it new or whether you're going to just renew your license and it'll get tacked on to whatever your license period is, now would be a great time to do it, just because you'll save a bunch of money doing it. So thanks so much. I hope you guys enjoyed, and we'll talk to you again real soon.